The overhead bin clicked shut above my head, and I pressed my forehead against the cold airplane window, watching the last ground crew members scatter across the tarmac like ants abandoning a sinking ship. 3 weeks. 21 days of walking into glass offices with my portfolio tucked under my arm like a shield that protected nothing. 21 days of hearing, "We'll be in touch," in voices that meant, "Don't call us." No. 21 days of my savings account bleeding out in a city that chewed me up and spit me back to Miami with nothing but rejection emails and a phone full of unanswered messages from my mother asking when I was coming home. I was coming home now, defeated, empty-handed. A 28-year-old graphic designer with a degree that cost more than my car, and a resume that apparently wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. The flight attendant's voice crackled through the speakers, something about final boarding and preparing for departure. But I wasn't listening. I was too busy replaying every single interview, every handshake that felt like goodbye before it even started, every portfolio page they flipped through with eyes that had already decided I wasn't enough. Someone settled into the seat beside me, and I didn't look up. I couldn't. If I made eye contact, if I had to smile and make small talk about where we were heading or why, I might actually break down right here in seat 14B. So I kept my face turned toward the window, toward the darkness beyond the runway lights, and tried to remember how to breathe through the tightness in my chest. Long day? The voice beside me was warm, textured like honey over gravel, and despite my best efforts to remain invisible, I glanced over. She was maybe in her early 40s, blonde hair pulled back in a way that looked effortless but probably wasn't, wearing a navy blazer over a white shirt that somehow looked both casual and expensive. Her eyes were blue-green, the color of shallow ocean water, and they held something I couldn't quite name. Kindness, maybe, or recognition. Something like that, I managed, and my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. She nodded, didn't push, just opened her laptop as the plane began to taxi. I should have been grateful for the silence, but instead I felt the weight of those 3 weeks pressing down on my shoulders, my chest, my throat. I pulled my bag from under the seat in front of me, intending to find my headphones and disappear into music for the next 3 hours, but my hands were shaking. From exhaustion or defeat or both, I wasn't sure. The resume was right there on top, paperclipped to that stupid letter I'd written to myself at 2 a.m. in a Brooklyn hostel that smelled like stale beer and broken dreams. I'd been crying, I remember that. Sitting on a bottom bunk that wasn't mine, trying to remember why I'd thought I could do this, why I'd believed in myself enough to drain my savings and fly to New York like some protagonist in a movie about following your dreams. The letter was supposed to remind me. 5 reasons not to give up. 5 reasons to keep going even when everything inside me was screaming to quit. I never meant for anyone else to see it. The plane lifted off, and Miami fell away beneath us, all those lights spreading out like spilled glitter. I watched until we punched through the clouds and there was nothing but darkness, and my own reflection staring back at me in the window. Somewhere over Georgia, maybe, or the Carolinas, exhaustion finally won. My eyes grew heavy, my head dropped, and I gave in to sleep without meaning to, without choosing to, my bag still open on my lap, and that resume with its paper-clipped confession still sitting on top like evidence of everything I wasn't. I woke up to warmth. Not the artificial heat blowing from the vents above, but human warmth, solid and steady beneath my cheek. It took me 3 full seconds to realize I was leaning against someone, that my head had found the shoulder of the woman in the blazer, that I'd literally fallen asleep on a complete stranger like some kind of exhausted child. I jerked upright, mortification flooding through me hot and immediate. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's okay," she said, and there was amusement in her voice, but not cruelty. "You were clearly exhausted. That's not an excuse for invading your personal space." I was scrambling for my bag, trying to create distance, trying to disappear into my seat. But she was holding something. My resume. The letter. My heart stopped. "This fell," she said simply, holding it out to me. But the way she was looking at me had changed. There was something softer there now, something that made my throat tight. I didn't mean to read it, but the first few lines, I wanted to die. Actually die. Right there in seat 14B, over somewhere in the American Southeast. I snatched the papers from her hand, shoving them back into my bag without looking at them, without acknowledging what she'd seen, what she knew about me now. "Christina Martinez," she said, and I realized she'd read my name too. Of course she had. It was right there at the top in the font I'd spent 3 hours choosing because I thought it made me look professional and creative and hireable. What a joke. "I'm Arizona Robbins." She extended her hand, and I shook it because what else could I do? Her grip was firm, warm, confident in a way I'd forgotten how to be. "I know this is going to sound strange," Arizona continued, and she hadn't let go of my hand yet. "But I read your list, your 5 reasons. I wanted to crawl under the seat. I wanted the plane to depressurize so I'd have an excuse to put on an oxygen mask and hide my face. But she was still talking, still holding my hand, still looking at me like I was something other than a disaster. "Reason number 3, she said quietly. "Because giving up would prove everyone who doubted you was right. I wrote something almost identical to that 15 years ago." I looked at her then, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't noticed before. Recognition, not of me, but of herself, of who she used to be. "I don't usually do this," Arizona said, finally releasing my hand. "Actually, I never do this. But I'm going to give you my card, and when you land in Miami, I want you to send me your portfolio." She reached into her bag, pulled out a business card that was heavy stock, minimalist design, just her name and an email address and the words, "Robbins Ventures, San Francisco," beneath. "I don't understand," I said, because I didn't. None of this made sense. Strangers didn't just offer to help. The world didn't work like that. I'd learned that lesson thoroughly over the past 3 weeks. "I run a venture capital firm," Arizona explained. "I invest in startups, mostly in tech and creative industries. I also mentor entrepreneurs, though I've been doing less of that lately." She paused, tapped her finger against the armrest between us. "I'm in Miami for meetings this week. I'd like to introduce you to some people. No promises, no guarantees, but your letter reminded me that sometimes the best investments aren't in companies. They're in people." I must have looked skeptical, because she smiled. "You think I'm being patronizing," she said, "or that this is pity. It's not. I read your reasons, Christina. Number 4, because you promised yourself at 22 that you'd never settle for a life that didn't scare you a little. That's not someone who needs pity. That's someone who needs a door opened." The flight attendant came by with drinks, and we both ordered water, and in that brief interruption, I tried to process what was happening. This woman, this Arizona Robbins from San Francisco with her expensive blazer and her venture capital firm, had read my desperate midnight letter and decided I was worth her time. It didn't make sense. Things like this didn't happen to people like me. "Why?" I finally asked. "You don't know me. You don't know if I'm any good." "You're right," Arizona agreed. "I don't know if you're good, but I know you're real. And in my experience, real is rarer and more valuable than good." She shifted in her seat to face me more directly. "Do you know how many pitches I sit through where everyone's performing? Where they've practiced their passion so many times it doesn't sound like passion anymore, just memorized lines? Your letter wasn't a performance. It was true. It was pathetic," I corrected, "and I wasn't fishing for reassurance. I meant it." "It was human," she said. "There's a difference." We fell into silence after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. She went back to her laptop, typing emails or reviewing documents or whatever venture capitalists do at 30,000 feet. I stared at her business card, running my thumb over the embossed letters of her name. Arizona Robbins. It sounded like a character from a novel, someone who couldn't possibly be real. But she was real. She was sitting right here, and she'd read my confession, and instead of looking at me with pity or judgment, she'd offered help. "Can I ask you something?" I said, breaking the silence. "Of course. Your list, the one you wrote 15 years ago, did the reasons work? Did they keep you going?" Arizona stopped typing. She closed her laptop slowly, carefully, and turned to look at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "No," she said simply. "They didn't work. I gave up anyway." My stomach dropped. Of course the reasons didn't work. Of course I was foolish for thinking a list could save me from my own inadequacy. "But," Arizona continued, and there was something fierce in her voice now, "giving up on that particular dream led me somewhere better. Somewhere I never would have found if I'd kept forcing something that wasn't meant to work. Sometimes the reasons aren't about keeping you on the same path. They're about keeping you alive long enough to find a different one." "What was your dream?" I asked. "The one you gave up on?" "Pediatric surgery," she said, and I must have looked surprised because she laughed. "I know, big pivot. I was in my 3rd year of medical school, drowning in debt and doubt, when I realized I was trying to live my father's dream, not mine. Walking away from that program felt like the biggest failure of my life. Telling my parents I was quitting medicine to get an MBA? That was worse than any rejection letter. But you're successful now," I pointed out. "You run your own firm." Now, yes, but at 28? I was working 18-hour days at a consulting company, living in a studio apartment with 2 roommates, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. She smiled, but there was something sad in it. Success looks inevitable in hindsight. In the moment, it just feels like surviving. The plane hit turbulence, and we both grabbed our armrests instinctively. When it smoothed out, Arizona was looking at me differently. "Send me your portfolio," she said again. "Tomorrow. Not when you feel ready, not after you've updated it or fixed whatever you think is wrong with it. Tomorrow. As is." "Okay," I heard myself say, even though every instinct told me to wait, to perfect it, to make sure it was good enough. "Tomorrow." "Good." Arizona reopened her laptop. "Now let me work for a bit, and you should try to sleep more. You look like you haven't had a full night's rest in weeks." She wasn't wrong. I couldn't remember the last time I'd slept more than 4 or 5 hours. Even in the hostel, I'd been waking up at odd hours, anxiety clawing at my chest, my mind running through all the ways I was failing. I didn't think I'd be able to sleep again, not with my mind racing through everything that had just happened. But the exhaustion was bone deep. At some point, my eyes closed, and this time I managed to keep my head against the window instead of Arizona's shoulder. When I woke again, we were descending into Miami, the city spreading out beneath us in familiar patterns of light. "Welcome home," Arizona said softly, and I realized she'd been watching me wake up. "Not much of a welcome," I muttered. "I left to conquer New York and came back with nothing." "You came back with my card," Arizona pointed out, "and a story about falling asleep on a stranger who happened to read your most vulnerable moment and decided you were worth investing in. That's not nothing." The plane touched down, smooth and gentle, and suddenly we were just 2 more passengers gathering our belongings, standing in the aisle, waiting for the doors to open. But something had shifted. Something had changed. As we walked through the terminal together, we were heading in the same direction anyway, she explained. Her car service was picking her up. Arizona asked me about my portfolio, about my favorite projects, about what kind of design made me feel most alive. And I answered honestly, without trying to sound impressive, without performing, because she'd already seen me at my worst. There was no point in pretending anymore. "I love branding for small businesses," I told her as we rode the escalator down to baggage claim. "The kind of places where the owner is still working the counter, where they know their customers' names. I know that's not where the money is, not the prestigious stuff, but those are the projects that make me feel like I'm doing something that matters. Why do you think that's not prestigious? Arizona asked. Because the big agencies don't care about that work. They want campaigns for corporations, brands that everyone recognizes. Small business branding is considered starter work. Practice before you get to do real projects. Or, Arizona said, it's the most real work there is. Creating identity for people who are building something from nothing, that's not practice. That's the whole game. We reached baggage claim, and I spotted my battered suitcase on the carousel. Arizona's was pristine, black, expensive looking. Of course it was. My driver's here, she said, checking her phone. But Christina? Send me that portfolio tomorrow, and be prepared for me to send you some contacts. I will, I promised. Thank you for all of this, for not thinking I was crazy. Oh, I definitely think you're crazy, Arizona said with a grin. But the best people usually are. She walked away then, rolling her suitcase behind her, and I watched her go until she disappeared into the crowd. Then I looked down at the business card still clutched in my hand, at the embossed letters spelling out a name that might just change everything. If this video found its way to you, maybe there's something in it meant for you too. Leave a like, subscribe to this channel, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I need to know I'm not alone in feeling this, in believing that sometimes the universe puts exactly the right person in your path when you need them most. Now, let me tell you what happened next, and afterward, tell me which part was meant for you. I sent the email at 7 the next morning, not because I'd followed Arizona's advice about not perfecting it. I'd stayed up until 3 in the morning updating my portfolio, tweaking layouts, agonizing over which projects to include, but because if I waited any longer, I'd lose my nerve entirely. The response came before I'd even finished my first coffee. Christina, beautiful work, exactly what I expected. I'm forwarding your information to 3 people, Marcus at Root Creative, Serena at Bloom Studios, and Patricia at an advertising firm downtown. They're all expecting your email. Mention my name. Lunch Thursday? There's a place in Coral Gables I think you'll like. A. I read the email 17 times, counted the contacts, 3 people, 3 actual humans who would look at my work because Arizona Robbins told them to. 3 chances I didn't have 24 hours ago. My hands were shaking as I typed responses to Marcus and Serena and Patricia, as I crafted careful emails that tried to sound confident and professional while my heart hammered against my ribs. I mentioned Arizona's name in the first sentence of each one, like a magic word that might open doors that had been slammed in my face for weeks. 2 responses came that afternoon. Serena wanted to schedule a call. Patricia asked me to come in Friday for a meeting. Marcus didn't respond at all, and I tried not to take it personally, tried to focus on the 2 who had answered, but my brain kept circling back to that silence, to what it might mean. Thursday arrived faster than I expected. I changed outfits 4 times before settling on black jeans and a gray blazer that I hoped said creative professional, and not trying too hard. The restaurant Arizona had chosen was small, tucked away on a side street, the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing unless you knew it was there. She was already seated when I arrived, at a table by the window, sunlight catching in her blonde hair. She looked different in daylight, more real somehow. She waved when she saw me, and I navigated between tables to reach her, suddenly self-conscious about everything. How I walked, where I put my hands, whether I should hug her or shake her hand or just sit down. Sit, she said, solving the problem for me. I already ordered us water and told them we needed a few minutes. I sat. The chair was comfortable. The restaurant smelled like fresh bread and something citrus. Thank you for this, I started, but Arizona held up a hand. Let's make a deal, she said. For the next hour, you don't thank me. You don't apologize. You don't minimize yourself or your work or your dreams. Deal? It was harder than it should have been to agree. Deal. Good. Now tell me about the calls. Serena first. So I told her. About how Serena had been warm on the phone, had asked thoughtful questions about my process, had mentioned a project they were pitching that might need someone with my specific aesthetic, about how Patricia's assistant had called to confirm the Friday meeting, and how I'd written down the address 3 times to make sure I had it right, about how Marcus still hadn't responded, and how I kept refreshing my email like a compulsion I couldn't control. Marcus won't respond, Arizona said matter-of-factly. He's going through a divorce and barely keeping his head above water. I should have thought of that before I sent him your portfolio, but he was the first person who came to mind for your style. Forget Marcus. Just like that? Just like that. You can't control who responds, Christina. You can only control what you send out into the world. She paused while the waiter brought menus, recited specials neither of us were really listening to. When he left, she continued, I want to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it. Can you do that? I nodded. Your work is good. Not good for someone who's struggling. Not good considering what you've been through. Just good. Period. The reason you're not getting hired isn't about your talent. It's about your energy. That stung more than I expected. My energy? In your emails, in how you present yourself, there's this current of apology running underneath everything. Like you're sorry for taking up space. Like you're asking permission to exist in rooms you've earned the right to be in. Arizona leaned forward. People can feel that, even if they don't consciously recognize it. And it makes them doubt you. Not because you're not good enough, but because you doubt yourself. I wanted to argue, wanted to defend myself. But she was right. I knew she was right. How do I fix it? I asked. You stop performing confidence and start being honest instead. Confidence is a mask. People see through masks. But if you walk in and say, I'm terrified I'm not good enough, and I'm going to show you my work anyway because it matters to me, that's not confidence. That's courage. And courage is magnetic. We ordered food. Talked about her firm, about the startups she was currently working with, about why she'd left San Francisco this week. She had meetings with a biotech company in Boca, she explained, and another in Fort Lauderdale. But she'd built in extra days because she'd been curious about Miami's creative scene. It's growing, she said. 5 years ago, there was nothing here for tech startups. Now, there's real energy, real potential. Is that why you wanted to help me? I asked. Because you're investing in Miami's creative scene. No, Arizona said simply. I wanted to help you because your letter reminded me what it feels like to be drowning, and because someone helped me once, when I was drowning, and I never forgot it. Who helped you? She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. My ex-wife, actually. Back when we were just colleagues and I was having a full breakdown in a coffee shop about quitting medical school. She bought me a coffee, listened to me spiral for 2 hours, and then asked me one question. If failure wasn't an option, what would you do? That question changed my life. What did you answer? I said I'd start a company that helped other people start companies. I'd invest in the ideas that scared people, the ones that felt too risky or too different. I'd be the person who said yes when everyone else said no. She took a sip of water. 3 years later, I did exactly that. And 10 years after that, my ex-wife and I got divorced because I'd become so consumed with work that I forgot how to be a person who wasn't CEO Arizona Robbins. There was something raw in her voice when she said it, something that made me understand this lunch wasn't just about mentoring me. It was about something else too. Something I couldn't quite name yet. Do you regret it? I asked quietly. The company? Choosing work over her? Every single day, Arizona said. But I also know I can't undo it. I can only try to be different going forward. Be more present, more honest, more willing to let people see behind the success story. She looked at me directly. Like right now, I'm sitting here with you, and part of it is because I want to help you. But part of it is because I'm lonely, Christina, because I'm in a city where I don't know anyone, and I read your letter on that plane, and I thought, there's someone who understands what it feels like to be scared and alone and desperate for connection. The admission hung between us, honest and unexpected. I didn't know what to say, how to respond to that kind of vulnerability from someone who seemed to have everything figured out. I'm lonely too, I finally said. All the time. Even in rooms full of people. Especially in rooms full of people, Arizona agreed. We finished lunch talking about smaller things. Her hotel, my apartment, the weather, places to eat in Miami. But underneath the small talk, something was shifting. Some awareness that this connection, whatever it was, went beyond mentor and mentee. Beyond investor and creative. We were two people who'd accidentally found each other in a moment when we both needed to be found. When the check came, Arizona grabbed it before I could even pretend to reach for my wallet. Next time you pay, she said, when you land a job and get your first paycheck. Deal. We walked outside together, into the Miami heat that pressed down like a weight. Her car was parked down the street, and we walked slowly, neither of us in a hurry to end this. Friday, Arizona said when we reached her car. After your meeting with Patricia. Call me and tell me how it went. You want me to call you? I want you to call me, she confirmed. Or text. Whatever feels comfortable. I want to know how it goes. And Christina, don't undersell yourself in that meeting. Don't apologize. Don't minimize. Just show them what you showed me. What did I show you? Someone real, she said. Someone brave enough to fall asleep on a stranger with her dreams literally in her lap. She got in her car then, and I watched her drive away, standing there on the sidewalk in Coral Gables while the sun beat down and tourists walked past, and my phone buzzed with an email from Serena asking about my availability next week. I was still lonely, still scared, still not sure if any of this would lead anywhere. But for the first time in 3 weeks, I felt something else too. Hope. Fragile and tentative, but real. The meeting with Patricia was a disaster. Not because I did anything wrong, but because halfway through my presentation, it became crystal clear that what they wanted was someone who could replicate trends, someone who would make safe choices that looked like everything else in their portfolio. They wanted a copier, not a creator. I sat in my car afterward in their parking garage and called Arizona without thinking about it, without second-guessing, just needing to hear her voice. How bad? She asked instead of hello. They wanted someone who could make everything look like Instagram had a baby with Pinterest, and they both went to design school in 2015. Arizona laughed, actually laughed, and somehow that made it better. So, not your people. Definitely not my people. Good. You would have been miserable there anyway. What about Serena? When's that meeting? Tuesday. She wants to see more of my small business branding work. Perfect. That's your strength. Lean into it. We talked for 20 more minutes while I sat in that parking garage, and she told me about a disastrous pitch meeting she'd sat through that morning. About an entrepreneur who'd spent 45 minutes talking about his vision without ever explaining what his company actually did. And I told her about the time I'd presented a logo to a client who'd asked if I could make it more blue, when it was already blue. I miss this, Arizona said suddenly. Miss what? Just talking. About nothing important, with someone who gets it. Gets what? The absurdity of it all. How you can work so hard and care so much and still have days where everything feels pointless. She paused. I'm in meetings all day tomorrow, but Saturday? Would you want to get coffee or walk on the beach? Something not work-related? My heart did something complicated in my chest. Like, as friends? Yeah, Arizona said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. As friends. I could use a friend in Miami. Saturday works, I said, trying to sound casual when nothing about this felt casual. Text me when and where. We hung up, and I sat there in my car, trying to process what had just happened. Arizona Robbins wanted to spend time with me. Not because I was a project or a mentee, but because she liked talking to me, because she was lonely too. I drove home through Miami traffic, windows down, letting the salt air fill my car, and I realized I was smiling. Actually smiling. Despite the terrible meeting, despite still not having a job, despite everything. Saturday arrived wrapped in that perfect Miami weather, where the heat hasn't quite settled in yet, and the ocean breeze makes everything bearable. We met at a coffee shop in South Beach, one of those places where the baristas are all aspiring models, and the coffee costs $8, but somehow tastes worth it. Arizona was already there, sitting at an outdoor table, wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt, her hair down around her shoulders. She looked different, younger, more relaxed. No blazer, I said, sitting down across from her. No interview outfit, she countered, gesturing at my sundress. We're both off duty. We got coffee and walked toward the beach, kicking off our shoes when we hit the sand. The ocean stretched out infinite and blue, and there were already people dotting the beach despite the early hour. Tourists taking selfies, locals doing yoga, kids building sandcastles with their parents. I used to come here, I said. When I first moved to Miami, I'd bring my sketchbook and just draw whatever caught my eye. People mostly. The way they moved, the way they held themselves. Do you still do that? Draw people? Not as much. Somewhere along the way, I started thinking it was frivolous. Not real work. I bent down to pick up a shell, smooth and pink. But I miss it. The feeling of just creating without purpose. Show me, Arizona said. What? Show me how you see people. Draw me something. I didn't have my sketchbook, but I had a pen in my bag, and Arizona had a receipt from the coffee shop. So I sat there in the sand and drew quick gesture sketches. A child running, a couple walking hand in hand, an old man reading a newspaper. Nothing detailed, just movement and energy captured in a few quick lines. Arizona watched over my shoulder, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something clean and slightly citrus. These are beautiful, she said quietly. Why did you stop thinking this was real work? Because you can't build a career on gesture sketches. They're practice, not product. Or they're the purest form of what you do, the thing everything else is built on. She took the receipt from my hand, studied the drawings. Can I keep this? It's just scribbles. It's not. It's how you see the world. That's not nothing. We walked for over an hour, talking about everything and nothing. She told me about growing up in San Francisco, about her father who was a surgeon, and her mother who taught literature, about how she'd always felt the pressure to achieve, to exceed, to be extraordinary. I told her about my family in Miami, my mother who cleaned houses and my father who'd left when I was 12. About how I'd been the first in my family to go to college, and how that had felt like both an honor and an unbearable weight. Do they know? Arizona asked. About New York? About how hard it's been? No, I told my mother I was having a great time, making connections, that things were going really well. I couldn't stand the idea of her knowing I'd failed. You didn't fail. You tried something that didn't work out. That's not the same thing. Feels the same. We'd reached a quieter stretch of beach. Fewer people, more space. Arizona stopped walking, turned to face the ocean. I told my ex-wife I was working late the night I missed our anniversary dinner, she said. Truth was, I'd forgotten completely. Was in the office reviewing pitch decks while she sat alone at a restaurant waiting for me. When I finally checked my phone and saw 17 missed calls, I knew. I knew I'd broken something that couldn't be fixed. Did you apologize? Of course, profusely. Brought flowers the next day, planned a makeup dinner, promised to do better. And I meant it. I really did. But I didn't change. 6 months later, she left. And I understood why. There was pain in her voice, old and deep. I wanted to say something comforting, something wise, but I had nothing. So I just stood next to her, close enough that our shoulders almost touched, and watched the waves roll in. I'm not good at this, Arizona said after a long silence. At being a person outside of work. I've built this whole identity around being the woman who invests in dreams, who mentors entrepreneurs, who builds companies. But I don't know who I am when I'm not doing that. Maybe that's okay, I offered. Maybe you don't have to know yet. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and something passed between us. Some understanding that we were both lost in different ways, both trying to figure out who we were supposed to be. I like spending time with you, Arizona said. Is that weird? We barely know each other. I like spending time with you too, I admitted. And yeah, it's weird. But most good things are. We walked back slowly, reluctant to end the morning. When we reached the coffee shop where we'd started, Arizona checked her phone and frowned. I have to go. Conference call in an hour and I need to review notes. Back to work, I said. Unfortunately. She hesitated, then reached out and squeezed my hand briefly. Tuesday. After your meeting with Serena, tell me everything. I will. She started to leave, then turned back. Christina? You're going to be okay. I know that doesn't help right now, but I know it. You're too stubborn not to be. I watched her go, and I felt that complicated feeling in my chest again. Not quite attraction, or maybe exactly attraction, but I wasn't ready to name it yet. Just this pull toward her, this desire to be near her, to know more about her, to let her know more about me. The meeting with Serena was everything Patricia's wasn't. She loved my small business work, understood exactly what I was trying to do with it. They were pitching a project for a collective of local artisans, she explained, and they needed someone who could create individual brand identities that still felt cohesive as a group. It's not glamorous, Serena warned. The budget is tight, the timeline is aggressive, and you'll be working directly with about 15 different people who all have opinions. I'll take it, I said before she even finished. She laughed. Don't you want to know the details? The pay? I want to know them, yes, but I'm taking it either way. This is exactly the kind of work I want to be doing. We talked for another hour about vision and process and timelines. When I left her office, I had a contract to review and a start date 2 weeks out, and a feeling in my chest like, maybe, finally, things were starting to work. I called Arizona from the parking lot again, because apparently that was becoming our thing. I got it, I said when she answered. Tell me everything. So I did. Every detail, every moment, every single thing Serena had said. And Arizona listened, asking questions, laughing at the right parts, understanding instinctively why this mattered so much. We should celebrate, she said when I finally stopped talking. Dinner, tomorrow, my treat. Arizona, you don't have to. I want to. Please, let me take you somewhere nice and celebrate the fact that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Okay, I said. Okay, yes. Yista. The restaurant she chose was intimate, romantic even. Soft lighting, tables far enough apart for privacy. A view of Biscayne Bay that made the whole city look like it was floating on water. I wore the one dress I owned that made me feel sophisticated, and when I walked in and saw Arizona already seated, wearing a dark blue dress that made her eyes look impossibly green, I felt my breath catch. This felt like a date, not a celebration dinner between mentor and mentee. Not friends getting together. A date. "You look beautiful," Arizona said when I sat down, and there was something in her voice I hadn't heard before. Something warm and soft and unmistakably interested. "So do you," I managed. We ordered wine, appetizers, entrees that we barely touched because we were too busy talking. About my new job, about her firm, about what we wanted our lives to look like in 5 years, 10 years, and somewhere between the main course and dessert, Arizona reached across the table and took my hand. "Is this okay?" she asked quietly. My heart was hammering so hard I was sure she could hear it. "Yeah, it's okay." "I need to tell you something," she said, her thumb tracing circles on my palm. "And I need you to be honest with me about how you feel about it." "Okay." "I think I'm developing feelings for you. Real ones. Not mentor feelings or friendship feelings. And I know that's complicated. I know there's a power dynamic here that makes this messy. But I also know I've never felt this way about anyone in years, and I can't just pretend it's not happening." The honesty of it took my breath away. No games, no playing it cool. Just raw truth laid out between us. "I feel it too," I said. "I've been trying not to because it's terrifying, and I don't know what it means or if it's real or if I'm just grateful and confused." "It's real," Arizona interrupted gently. "For me, it's real." "For me too," I admitted. "But I don't know how to do this. I don't know what this even is." "Neither do I, but I know I want to find out." She squeezed my hand. "I'm going back to San Francisco on Sunday. I have meetings there all next week, maybe longer, but I don't want this to end just because I'm leaving Miami. Long distance before we're even whatever this is. Or we figure it out as we go. Calls, texts, visits when we can. I'll be back in Miami in a few weeks anyway for follow-up meetings. And maybe..." She paused, took a breath. "Maybe you could come visit me in San Francisco sometime. See where I live, meet my friends. Let me show you my city the way you're showing me yours." It was too fast, too much, too soon. Every rational part of my brain was screaming warnings, listing all the ways this could go wrong, all the reasons to pump the brakes and be careful. But when I looked at Arizona, at the hope and fear mixed in her eyes, at the way she was holding my hand like it was something precious, I couldn't bring myself to care about rational. "Okay," I said. "Let's figure it out as we go." She smiled then, wide and genuine and beautiful, and I felt something settle in my chest, some certainty that this was right, even if I didn't understand it yet, even if it scared me. We skipped dessert and walked along the bay instead, talking about logistics and feelings and what happens next. When she drove me home, we sat in her car outside my apartment building for an hour, just talking, not wanting the night to end. "I should go in," I finally said, even though I didn't want to. "You should," Arizona agreed, but neither of us moved. "Arizona?" "Yeah?" "Thank you. For everything. For reading my letter. For helping me. For this. Whatever this becomes." "Thank you for falling asleep on my shoulder," she said with a smile. "Best plane ride I've ever had." I leaned across the console and kissed her cheek, quick and soft, and then I got out of the car before I could lose my nerve. I could feel her watching me as I walked to my building, could feel the weight of this new thing between us, fragile and powerful at the same time. Inside my apartment, I stood at the window and watched her car pull away, and I thought about that letter I'd written to myself in Brooklyn. 5 reasons not to give up. None of them had been, because a beautiful woman on a plane will read it and change your life. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the reasons we plan for aren't the ones that end up mattering. The next few weeks were a blur of starting my new job at Root Creative, late-night phone calls with Arizona, and slowly figuring out what we were becoming to each other. The work was everything I'd hoped. Challenging, meaningful, Exactly the kind of creative problem-solving that made me feel alive. And Arizona. Arizona was patient and present, and showed up in ways I'd never experienced before. She sent flowers to my office on my first day. Called me every night even when she was exhausted from meetings. Texted me photos of San Francisco sunsets with captions like, "Wish you were here to see this in person." And we talked about everything. Our fears, our dreams, our past relationships and current loneliness and what we wanted the future to look like. "I'm falling for you," I told her one night, 3 weeks into this whatever we were. Like really falling. And it scares me. "Good," Arizona said. "It scares me too. But I think the best things always do." She flew back to Miami 6 weeks after our dinner, showed up at my apartment on a Friday evening with takeout and wine, and the kind of smile that made my knees weak. And this time, when we kissed, it wasn't just a quick peck. It was real and deep and full of all the things we'd been too scared to say out loud. We spent that whole weekend together, barely leaving my apartment, just existing in each other's space. Learning the way we fit together, the rhythm of our breathing, the sound of each other's laughter. It was terrifying and perfect, and nothing like I'd imagined love could feel. On Sunday, when she had to leave for the airport, I drove her and we sat in the departure drop-off zone, both of us reluctant to say goodbye. "Come to San Francisco next month," Arizona said. "Stay for a week. Meet my world." "I will," I promised. "I want to see your life, all of it." "Christina?" She took my face in her hands. "I know this is fast. I know we're figuring it out as we go. But I need you to know. This isn't casual for me. You're not casual for me." "You're not casual for me either," I said. "You're everything. You're becoming everything." We kissed one more time, and then she was gone, walking into the terminal with her pristine suitcase and her confident stride. And I sat there in my car feeling like my whole world had shifted on its axis. Root Creative became more than just a job. I led the Artisan Collective project, created brand identities that made those small business owners cry when they saw them, built something I was genuinely proud of. Serena promoted me after 3 months, gave me more responsibility, trusted me with bigger projects. And through it all, Arizona was there. On the phone, in texts, in video calls where we'd just sit together in comfortable silence while we both worked. I flew to San Francisco on a Friday in November, nervous and excited and terrified all at once. Arizona picked me up from the airport herself, didn't send a car service, just stood there in arrivals with flowers and a smile that made me forget every worry I'd had. Her apartment was beautiful, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, minimalist decor that somehow felt warm, bookshelves lined with titles about business and medicine and LGBTQ+ history. It felt like her, confident and thoughtful and carefully curated. "Welcome to my world," she said, setting my bag down by the door. "It's beautiful," I said, and I meant both the apartment and the fact that she was letting me into this private space. This piece of her life she kept separate from everything else. That week in San Francisco was everything. She took me to her favorite restaurants, introduced me to her friends who ran startups and nonprofits and galleries. We hiked in Marin, drove down to Big Sur, spent an entire day in bed, reading and talking and just being together. And I saw her, really saw her, in her element, in her city, in the life she'd built. I could see myself here, I told her on our last night, sitting on her couch with my head on her shoulder. Not giving up Miami, but splitting time, being part of both worlds. "Yeah?" Arizona asked, and I could hear the hope in her voice. "Yeah, if you want that, if that's something you'd want." "I want you," she said simply. "However that looks, wherever that means." 3 months later, Serena called me into her office with news. They were opening a satellite location in San Francisco, needed someone to lead the West Coast branding division, someone who understood both the Miami sensibility and could build relationships in a new market. "It's you," Serena said. "If you want it." You'd split time between both offices, maybe 3 weeks a month in San Francisco, 1 week here. But I need to know, is there a reason you'd want to spend more time in California? I thought about Arizona, about her apartment with the bay views, about the life we'd been slowly building together across 3,000 miles, about how I'd fallen asleep on her shoulder 6 months ago and woken up to everything changing. "Yeah," I said. "There's a reason." That night, I called Arizona from my balcony, looking out at the Miami skyline. "I got offered a position," I said. "San Francisco, 3 weeks a month." There was a pause, and then, "Are you taking it? Do you want me to?" "I want you to do what makes you happy," Arizona said carefully. "But if you're asking if I want you here, in my city, in my life, more permanently, yes. God, yes." "Then I'm taking it," I said, and I could hear her exhale. "When do you start?" "Next month. I need to find a place, figure out logistics." "Stay with me," Arizona interrupted, "until you find something. Or just stay with me, if you want." My heart was racing. We'd been together for 6 months, most of it long distance. Moving in together felt fast, felt reckless, felt like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there was water below. "Okay," I said anyway. "Okay, yes." Because sometimes the scariest choices are the right ones. Sometimes falling asleep on a stranger's shoulder leads to waking up in a life you never imagined, but can't imagine living without. Sometimes a letter you wrote to yourself at 2 a.m. becomes the map to exactly where you were meant to be. I moved to San Francisco in January, exactly 1 year after that flight from New York. Arizona helped me pack my Miami apartment, drove with me across the country because I wanted to see everything in between. We stopped in New Orleans and Austin and Phoenix, stayed in cheap motels and expensive hotels, talked about our future and our fears and all the ways this could be amazing. Her apartment became our apartment. My design aesthetic mixed with her minimalism. My books joined hers on the shelves. My coffee mug sat next to hers in the cabinet. We figured out how to share space, how to be together without losing ourselves, how to build something that belonged to both of us. Root Creative's San Francisco office grew under my leadership. I hired a small team, landed major clients, built partnerships with local businesses. And Arizona. Arizona learned how to leave work at the office, how to be present, how to choose us even when choosing us wasn't convenient. We had our first real fight about 4 months in. About her working late, about me feeling neglected, about old patterns trying to reassert themselves. But we talked through it, honest and raw, and came out the other side stronger, more sure. "I love you," she said that night, the first time either of us had said it out loud. "I love you, and I'm sorry, and I'm choosing you. I'll keep choosing you." "I love you too," I said, "and I'm choosing you too, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. We've been together for 2 years now. I still split time between San Francisco and Miami, still lead projects for small businesses and artisans who remind me why I fell in love with design in the first place. Arizona still runs her firm, still mentors entrepreneurs, but she's learned to turn off her phone during dinner, to take weekends off, to prioritize us. We're not perfect. We still have hard days, still struggle with balancing 2 demanding careers and maintaining a relationship that spans 2 cities. But we're real. We're honest. We're building something that scares us both in the best possible way. Sometimes I think about that night on the plane, about how exhausted I was, how defeated, about that letter paperclipped to my resume, those 5 reasons to keep going. And I think about how none of those reasons mentioned love or connection or finding someone who would see me at my lowest and decide I was worth investing in. But maybe that was always the hidden reason, the one I couldn't have written, because I didn't know to hope for it. Maybe all those other reasons were just keeping me alive long enough to fall asleep on the right shoulder, to wake up to the right pair of eyes, to stumble into the life I was always meant to find. Arizona still has that receipt from the beach, the one with my gesture sketches. She framed it, hung it in her office between her MBA diploma and a photo of us in Big Sur. When I asked her why, she said it reminded her that the most valuable things aren't always the ones that look impressive on paper. Sometimes they're scribbles in the sand, confessions at 2 a.m, connections that start with a stranger's kindness and grow into something that changes everything. I'm writing this from our apartment. Yes, our apartment, because I stopped keeping one foot in Miami and finally admitted this is home. And Arizona is in the next room on a conference call. I can hear her voice through the door, confident and warm, and I know that when she's done, she'll come find me, kiss the top of my head, ask about my day, and I'll tell her. About the new project I landed, about the local coffee shop that needs rebranding, about the scared 28-year-old who emailed me today asking for advice. I'll tell her everything, the way I've learned to do, the way she taught me was safe. This story started with defeat and exhaustion, and a letter I never meant anyone to read. It started with giving up on one dream and not knowing if there was another one waiting. It started with closing my eyes on a plane and waking up to find that sometimes the universe puts exactly the right person in the seat next to you when you need them most. And if there's anything I've learned, it's this. The moments that change your life rarely announce themselves. They don't come with trumpets or clear signs. They come disguised as ordinary moments. A plane ride, a shoulder to sleep on, a letter that falls from your lap. They come when you're too tired to perform, too defeated to pretend, too honest to be anything but exactly who you are. So to anyone listening who's exhausted, who's defeated, who's carrying around their own letter full of reasons to keep going, I see you. I was you. And I'm telling you that sometimes giving up on the path you thought you were supposed to take is exactly what opens you up to the path you were always meant to find. Sometimes falling asleep is how you wake up. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another. And sometimes, if you're very, very lucky, the person whose shoulder you fall asleep on becomes the person you wake up next to for the rest of your life. If this story touched something in you, if you saw yourself in Christina's fear, or Arizona's loneliness, or the way they found each other when they both needed it most, I need to know I'm not alone in believing that love like this exists, that second chances are real, that sometimes the universe conspires to put the right people in each other's paths at exactly the right time. Leave a like if you believe in love that starts with honesty instead of perfection. Subscribe if you want more stories about women loving women in real, messy, beautiful ways, not fairy tales, but actual tales of people finding each other and choosing each other and building lives together. And comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me about the moment everything changed for you. Tell me about the person who saw you at your worst and decided you were worth everything. Because these stories matter. Your story matters. And every time you share it, you give someone else permission to believe their story isn't over yet either. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me believe that somewhere out there, someone needed to hear this exact story today. That someone needed to know it's okay to be exhausted, okay to fall apart, okay to let someone see you when you're not at your best, because sometimes that's exactly when the best things find you. This is a channel dedicated to telling stories about love between women, not as a spectacle, not as a fantasy, but as the real, complicated, transformative thing it is. If that resonates with you, if you want more of these stories, if you need to know you're not alone in your journey, stay with me. Subscribe. Come back. Let's build a community of people who believe in second chances and honest love and the power of showing up as exactly who we are. And to the person who needed this story today, the one who's exhausted, the one who's carrying their own letter full of reasons, the one who's wondering if it gets better, it does. Not in the way you expect, not on the timeline you want, but it does. Keep going. Fall asleep if you need to. Trust that the right shoulder will be there when you do. And know that your story, your real, messy, beautiful story is still being written. Thank you for being part of mine.